The AP Top 25 hasn't really changed all that much. The one thing I noticed is Georgia, their mid game against Kent State, they weren't great. They won by 17, but they lost 4 first-place votes. They lost 1 to Alabama and 3 to Ohio State. So Alabama and Ohio State both getting 4 first-place votes. Georgia getting 55. I got to be honest. Georgia was impressive the first 3 weeks, really impressive. I thought that game against Kent State would have cost them a little bit more votes. Maybe not all the votes, but a little bit more.
I think that the sleepwalking element of it, and I know that's like a cliche thing to say, but I do think that if you look at that game and they still won, it's just like if I was a voter, I would still put them at number 1. I wouldn't have seen enough from Ohio State to jump them.
Well, I think I would have voted Georgia number 1 too, but all 3 at the top, Georgia, Alabama, Ohio State, all 3 have been dominant outside of one game. Ohio State's non-dominant game was against Notre Dame. Alabama's non-dominant game was a 1-point win over Texas, and Georgia's non-dominant game was a 17-point win over a MAC school. Like, I just feel like...
How would you power rate these teams just as they are in the AP poll, 1 through 3?
Georgia, Alabama, Ohio State?
Yeah, let's just say you are setting lines.
I gotta be honest.
For those games.
I feel like they're a group. I feel like they're all the same team.
Mm-hmm.
Like there's just... I would start ranking the top 25 like after them because I would set them aside. I don't know within that group.
So you think it's just
within that group? I would still go 1 Georgia. I would probably go 2 Ohio State, 3 Bama.
Okay, I'm a little bit higher on Bama than you, but not like these are little margins where if we were power rating them, you had a rating of 62. Mine was 60 in terms of like overall, and then Georgia 63.
In fairness to Ohio State, I think Alabama had a bad game at Texas. I feel like Ohio State had a bad half against Notre Dame. They were down. They dominated the second half. They didn't score a whole lot of points, but they were down at half and then ended up winning by double digits. So
my thing with it is that Georgia was quote mid or however you just described it last week, but Georgia has never even been close to in danger of losing a game. Alabama clearly was. They almost lost to Texas.
Right.
And then Ohio State wasn't by the end of the Notre Dame game.
How do you balance Georgia beating Kent State by 17 with Alabama playing on the road to Texas? Like,
Texas just lost,
but
too.
Do you think in your mind, like, if Georgia, the way they played against Kent State, if that were on the road to Texas, what would that have looked like? Do you go that deep?
But then how do you balance how Georgia played against Oregon?
Mm-hmm.
Now that's
with Oregon and Texas played. I think they're pretty similar teams.
That's the big separator right now because Oregon is number 13 in the country.
They're a good team.
They're a good team. They've bounced back. They got a road win at Washington State. They've beaten BYU at home. Oregon's fine. Bo Nix is doing some things up there, and Georgia just eviscerated them.
That's the main
That's the
difference.
big separator in this whole thing.
And Ohio State clearly got everything right, over the last few weeks. That Notre Dame win, and I know it was week 1, and I know the second half they dominated, that still now looks a little bit fishier. Not bad, but a little bit fishier than we thought it would because of how bad Notre Dame has been.
Okay, so question, as we go forward in the season, let's say they all 3 go undefeated, just for in the regular season.
Yep.
Does 1, 2, and 3 ever change? Like, Alabama's got a trip to Arkansas coming up. Ohio State's got Penn State coming up. They got Michigan. Well, Michigan's at the end of the season. Georgia doesn't really have as much playing in the SEC East. So will this? They got Kentucky, but I don't think Kentucky's going to be top 10 by the time Georgia plays.
So let's say Bama runs through Arkansas,
right?
Runs through Tennessee. Georgia only beats Tennessee by 7 to 10. Then you could see Bama taking that a step forward. Ohio State, I think, is probably going to be in that 3 range for a while. But if they destroy the likes of Michigan and Penn State and then win the Big Ten handedly, you could see them out 1. I don't think it will really matter because, they're not going to put – it's going to be interesting because the age-old question will come up. If the SEC Championship's Georgia-Bama and then whoever loses, do you put them down all the way to 4 to have them have a rematch right away? Probably not. So –
well, now wait. Just looking at what I see right now, I think there's a chance Clemson gets through their schedule undefeated. They're 5. I think USC could get through their schedule undefeated. So there might be a world where there's no safety net for the SEC runner-up.
We play this game every year though, and losses always happen. It always works out.
The way I see Ohio State,
not always, but it comes close to.
The way I see Ohio State jumping is depending on what happens with Michigan and Penn State as we go through the season. Because, you mentioned Georgia. Now, if Georgia's just killing every single team in the SEC East, fine. But if they're winning close games, but Michigan stays undefeated until they play Ohio State, Penn State is undefeated until they play Ohio State, those wins will push Ohio State higher eventually. I don't know if they jump Georgia right away, but at the end of the season, you look at it and you say, okay, right now, Michigan at number 4, Penn State at 11, I think Penn State should be in the top 10. Those wins right there are going to be more impressive than Alabama beating Arkansas or A&M or Tennessee or whoever it may be.
It's all rankings, and they don't matter right now. I just want to point out that I think Michigan at 4 right now is absurd. It's absurd.
Where would you put them?
Behind Clemson, behind USC. Those teams have at least played decent competition. Clemson has a road win at a ranked team. USC has played decent competition. Michigan has played 3 of the worst non-conference opponents you can possibly play, and then a 7-point win over Maryland. I just don't see there's certainly not a number 4 resume behind them right now.
I would agree with that. I don't think they should drop any further than 6th. But I do think that I mentioned sleepwalking. It felt like a lot of teams had that moment throughout the weekend. Michigan, and I know they're playing Iowa, and Iowa.
That's my biggest eyeballs game of the week. You better be paying attention.
That's where that will tell me exactly where I think they should be.
That's danger time for Michigan.
Because Michigan could have easily, and again, cliche, but sleptwalk through Maryland. Talia played really well. You've been high on Maryland. Maryland is not a bad football team. If they recreate that type of game, and obviously probably be much lower scoring because Iowa doesn't know how to score touchdowns, then you start saying, okay, they're not the 4th team in the country. If they handle Iowa completely fine, they'll beat Indiana. That to me, then going into number 11 Penn State in the middle of October, they deserve to be number 4.
I just feel like on Saturday, I got this weird feeling that you're going to look up at 1:30 in the afternoon, and Michigan's going to be trailing Iowa 10-3, and you're going to wonder what in the hell is going on.